These are the notes for section 9.1, multiplication and division of rational expressions. First, let's talk about that word rational, and remember that rational means fraction. Fraction. So we are multiplying and dividing fractions. This time we have variables to deal with. So let's take a look at example 1 first. It's 18x to the 5th y squared divided by 12x y to the 3rd. Looking at the 18 and the 12 first, 6 divides evenly into both of them, into 18 3 times, and into 12 2 times. Keep your fraction. There are 5 x's in the numerator, divided by 1 x in the denominator. That leaves us with 4 x's in the numerator. And y to the 3rd in the denominator, y squared in the numerator, leaves a y in the denominator. Example 2, x squared minus x minus 12 divided by x squared minus 16. It's going to be a humongous help if you put parentheses around these things. Look at that numerator of x squared minus x minus 12. It's a trinomial, and yes, it's going to factor into two binomials. It factors into x minus 4 times x minus 3, times x plus 3, divided by, that denominator also factors into two binomials, x minus 4 times x plus 4. X minus 4 reduces to 1. It does not reduce to 0, it reduces to 1. Remaining in our numerator, we have x plus 3 divided by x plus 4. Keep those parentheses because it needs to be x plus 3 done in the numerator first and x plus 4 done in the denominator first. You cannot divide those x's and make it a 1. The answer is x plus 3 divided by x plus 4. Let's look at example 3. Instead of 5 minus x, I'd really like to write that x term first. To change the order, I am going to factor out a negative 1. So it's going to be negative 1 times x minus 5. To change the order for 8 minus x, I'm going to again factor out a negative 1, and it's x minus 8 in those parentheses. Don't lose that negative 1. 4 minus x factors into negative 1 times x minus 4. We'll use that feature in example 4. If we look at our numerator here in example 4, we have x squared plus 2x minus 24 divided by 16 minus x squared. We can factor the numerator into x plus 6 times x minus 4. I want to change the order of the denominator, so I'm going to factor out a negative 1. And then I'm going to have x squared minus 16. X squared minus 16 factors into two binomials. Our numerator is still x plus 6 times x minus 4 divided by negative 1 times x plus 4 times x minus 4. Now we need to reduce. X minus 4 divided by x minus 4 equals 1. In our numerator, we have x plus 6. Our denominator is negative 1 times x plus 4. Example 5. We're going to do some serious factoring here, so be careful. 12x squared plus 3x divided by 10x minus 5 times 8x minus 12 divided by 9x plus 18. factor each part individually. So the numerator here, 12x squared plus 3x, we can factor out a 3x. It's going to be times 4x plus 1 divided by, factor out a 5 times 2x minus 3 times, on the other side, I'm going to factor out a 4 times 2x minus 3. And in the denominator, we can factor out a 9 times x plus 2. Remember, let's reduce before we multiply. On the diagonal, we can reduce 2x minus 3 and 2x minus 3 reduce to 1. We can reduce the 3 and the 9. The 3 becomes a 1, the 9 becomes a 3. In our numerator, we're going to have 4x times 4x plus 1, keep those parentheses, divided by 5 times 3 is 15 times x plus 2. Example 6. Again, more factoring. X squared plus 2x minus 15 divided by 9 minus x squared times x squared minus 3x minus 18 divided by x squared minus 7x plus 6. Take your time with your factoring. Our first numerator is going to factor in x plus 5 times x minus 3. That denominator, I'm going to factor out a negative 1. Then I'm going to have x squared minus 9 times x minus 6 times x plus 3 divided by x minus 6 times x minus 1. We are not finished factoring the denominator in the left fraction. It's x plus 5 times x minus 3 divided by negative 1 times x plus 3 times x minus 3. Rewrite that second fraction, x minus 6 times x plus 3 divided by x minus 6 times x minus 1. X minus 6 divided by x minus 6 is 1. X minus 3 divided by x minus 3 is 1. X plus 3 divided by x plus 3 is 1. Our final product is x plus 5 divided by negative 1 times x minus 1. Example 7. We're going to need to factor, and it's a division problem. So you remember, we keep the first fraction the same, change the division to multiplication, and flip the second fraction, make it its reciprocal. And we also have to factor. So here we go. 4x minus 8 factors into 4 times x minus 2. I want to rewrite that denominator, so I'm going to factor out a negative 1, so I can change my order. X squared minus 2x minus 15 times, I'm going to factor my numerator, but I'm going to write it in the denominator. X times x minus 4. And I'm going to factor my denominator, but write it in the numerator. I'm going to factor out a 3x times x minus 5. Factoring wise, all that's left is to factor that trinomial in the denominator here. So 4 times x minus 2 divided by negative 1 times x minus 5 times x plus 3 times 3x times x minus 5 divided by x times x minus 4. Now look at what can be reduced. X minus 5 times x divided by x minus 5 is 1. X divided by x is 1. And now we need to multiply. Our numerator, we have to do 3 times 4, 12 times x minus 2, divided by negative 1 times x plus 3 times x minus 4. Example 8. It's a division one again. Yes, we're going to need to factor again. Our first fraction, we keep it the same, so it's x cubed y squared divided by, let's factor, x squared minus 3x minus 10, x minus 5 times x plus 2 times, take my numerator and put it in my denominator, xy to the 4th. And that denominator is going to factor into x minus 5 times x plus 4. Keep those parentheses. X minus 5 divided by x minus 5 is 1. At this point, if you would like to rewrite, you may. X cubed y squared times x plus 4 divided by x y to the 4th times x plus 2. We still need to reduce our x's. Have an x squared in the numerator. Y squared divided by y to the 4th is y squared in the denominator, times x plus 4 in the numerator, times x plus 2 in the denominator. Those are the notes for section 9.1, multiplication and division of rational expressions.